Well, good morning, everyone. It is 8 a.m., and I will call this special meeting of the Westwood Select Board to order. It is July 17, 2026, and this is a special meeting for the purpose of interviewing candidates for the Westwood Police Chief position. I am Mary Ann LeBlanc Cummings, Chair of the Westwood Select Board. With me are my colleagues, Joe Prevotera and Aaron Sibley. Westwood Media Center is here, and we grant permission to record the meeting and to anyone else who would like to record the meeting. I will now invite our town administrator, Connor Reed, to provide a brief summary of the police recruitment process to date.
Sure. Thank you, Mary Ann. I'm pleased this morning to transmit to the Select Board 3 finalists for your consideration as Chief of Police. In order that they will be interviewed, you have Nickolas Jamali, who is currently a lieutenant with the Duxbury Police Department. You will then have Deputy Superintendent Russell O'Neill from the Brookline Police Department. And your third interview will be Lieutenant and Acting Chief of Police Michael DiLalla of the Westwood Police Department. Each of these 3 candidates have passed 3 stages of interview and assessment, as outlined back in April to the board and the public. That includes interviewing with Westwood's administrative leadership, including the Superintendent of Public Schools, successfully passing through a police chief assessment center of numerous police chiefs and retired fire chief, and a public safety panel of Westwood's public safety leadership, along with residents of Westwood who have their own deep expertise in public safety. Each of these 3 candidates performed well at all 3 stages. They carry advantageous quantitative assessment center scores ranging from 84 to 91, and they were all unanimously recommended by the public safety panel as the 3 finalists from which you'll choose your next chief. All candidates have a professional experience responsive to the Town of Westwood Police Chief job description. Each has experience well in excess of the town's minimum experience laid out in the town code. They all carry stellar references from their prior police supervisors, and none of them return any discipline on state post databases. From a process standpoint, this morning you have the 3 interviews at 1 hour each. The board, for the public's benefit, is not deliberating and selecting the chief at the end of this interview today. They will reconvene Monday at 6 p.m., at which point they will deliberate and select a chief subject to Corey, Sori, and contract. This meeting today is being filmed, as the chair noted. It is not being broadcast live for the benefit of fairness of all the candidates in the event they are going second or third. And the meeting Monday night, the deliberation and selection of the chief will be broadcast live for folks who would like to follow it along if they can't physically make it. But in both cases, there's not public comment at this meeting or Monday night, to balance having the public having the right to watch and understand their board interviewing and deliberating and selecting such an important position while maintaining a tight schedule and a professional process. So if there's no questions from the board, we'd be happy to bring the first candidate in.
Yes, please. Thank you. Good morning.
Lieutenant Jamali for the board.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Lieutenant Jamali. I'm Mary Ann LeBlanc Cummings, Chair of the Westwood Select Board, and with me are my colleagues, Joe Prevotera and Aaron Sibley. We are delighted to be with you this morning, and we thank you for your interest in the position. The board has reserved 1 hour for this interview this morning, and we have 10 prepared questions. So we'll ask you to please try to limit your answers to about 3 minutes so that we have time for follow-up and discussion. And you will be given an opportunity for a brief closing statement following the prepared questions. The first question we have for you is, what has drawn you to apply for the position of Chief of Police in Westwood? And as part of that, in your opinion, what are the meaningful similarities and differences between your current department and Westwood? And are there specific practices or policies from your current department that you believe would benefit Westwood, and why?
For sure. So I would say my current community in Westwood had plenty of similarities, about the same population. The department's structure and size is nearly identical, and I think that was one of my first draws, to be quite honest. It was currently where I am in my career, and between my trainings, my experience, I feel that I was ready to take on the role of a chief of police, and finding a community that suited me was important. And Westwood draws similarities with, like I said, population, with the department structure. And when I looked at the needs of the community, a lot of the things were very similar, including, the concerns over traffic, the concerns over different types of crimes. They just kind of matched, and it was something that I felt I would be very comfortable handling. I look at, the growing, Westwood is just such a growing town, where you have University Ave, you've got right now you guys are dealing with the whole Costco situation where you want to try to remanage Route 1, and these are things that we've had to deal with in Duxbury, maybe to different extents, but similar enough. We've had to restructure rotaries. We've had to, right now we're working on our bridge to our beach, which is one of the most popular beaches in the state. And we're working right now with Mass DOT to try to restructure the traffic routing and what that plan would look like for a 5-year project such as that. So again, there was a lot of draw with the similarities, and for me, professionally, I felt that I had the skills to apply towards being a chief of police. Again, I can't speak enough about from what I've learned about this department as an accredited agency, which we have been in Duxbury since I have been employed by the town of Duxbury. So I understand the accreditation process. I understand the ongoing role that is accreditation. It's not just something that you achieve and then that's it, we're done, we're accredited. It's an ongoing process, and it's not something you can just even look at every 3 years during the reaccreditation process. It's something that you have to continuously integrate into the department. And again, these are all things that I've done and I'm comfortable with, and I feel I can apply to Westwood.
Thank you.
Can I just ask a quick follow-up question? In Duxbury is still a civil service department, is that correct?
So Duxbury is still civil service. However, we have adopted the new civil service law that allows us to hire outside of civil service under certain circumstances. Those officers that we hire outside of service eventually become a civil service employee. However, we've now expanded our hiring practices to include non-civil service folks that may not have necessarily taken the civil service test. We can use other means to gain candidates, vet them out, hire, train them, and employ them.
Interesting. So it's almost a hybrid model.
It is a hybrid model now, yeah. And when we have, I'm responsible for the hiring for the department. I have already hired officers under this hybrid model, so I'm comfortable with it, and we've been able to integrate them quite well.
Thank you.
You know it's going to come up, so let's talk about community policing and what it means to you, and how do you ensure that policing practices reflect the community's values?
Sure. So, again, where the communities are so similar, community policing is absolutely integral to the way we handle policing every day in a town like Duxbury, a town like Westwood. I was a school resource officer for several years. I understand the importance of making sure that your face is out there in the community, that you are relating to the residents of the community, that you are taking in their feedback and understanding their needs. And I don't think it can ever be that you can ever really explain the importance of making sure that the community feels heard. You need to have those sit-downs with community members. You need to understand what the parents want. You need to understand what different residents from different neighborhoods want. You want to integrate with them. We're policing for them. We're not policing them necessarily. So we need to understand what the community needs are. And the best way to do that is make sure our officers are out there. They're visible, they're approachable. And, you know, there's sometimes that wall that gets built up with this militaristic looking person that's, you know, 6'5" and buzz cut and, you know, all this tactical gear on. That's not necessarily what we're looking for. We're looking for an officer that has the face and the understanding of the community. They can go out there to the businesses, shake hands, let people talk to them, you know, make sure you're having those conversations when people want to have those conversations. It's, you know, let our officers be the brand ambassadors for Westwood PD.
In Westwood, our community feedback has consistently emphasized visibility, accessibility, and engagement as priorities and areas of growth. And you touched on it a little bit, but how would you further strengthen relationships between the PD and the community? And as chief specifically, how do you picture making yourself sort of visible and accessible to people in Westwood?
So I think one of the great things that worked for us, and I would like to continue the practice in Westwood, would be using liaison officers. It's a great tool. What it does is it gives our officers another avenue of career improvement, another ancillary duty that maybe kind of breaks down the doldrums of their everyday mundane, you know, just going to their calls, doing their traffic stops and whatnot. It gives them a little bit extra, and it makes them feel engaged in the community. So, you know, what my proposal would be to create a liaison officer for the business districts, especially University Ave, where we have such a big, you know, condensed area of traffic, community members, outside community members, and travelers and businesses. So it's just again, one of the things I think would be a great tool for Westwood. And you create a liaison officer. They meet with the business owners. They meet with other community leaders in the area, and they make sure that they know that they're the avenue. If you have an issue, you can go through them. We make sure we integrate officers into, we call it highway safety, but I believe you guys have this pedestrian and bicycle safety committee and things like that. Make sure they're integrated into those committees and they're going to those meetings. And you don't just want one officer attached to that. Maybe you have another one, so we're always present, because not everyone can make every meeting. So they can hear the community's complaints about traffic concerns, pedestrian concerns, bicyclist concerns, and they can provide some answers, but they can also bring back the concerns to the police department so that we can brainstorm and figure out, hey, what's the best way to solve this problem on this street? Or, you know, there's a concern because, you know, the school hours are changing and now we have to address the bus routes a little bit differently. Or there's some new construction that's going to be going on for 6 months or so. How are we going to address the concerns for commuters? You know, it's a lot of that brainstorming and making the community feel like they have a say, they have part of this, and the police department's engaged actively. So making sure we have officers that are out there with different groups in town and focused on what the community needs are. And as chief, I have to be completely integrated into that system. So I can't just allow send my officers off and I can be, you know, a man behind a curtain somewhere. I need to be engaged in that too. So I need to be present during those meetings. Now, would I be able to go to everything all the time? No, and that's why we have liaison officers to try to bridge that gap. But I need to make sure that I'm accessible, I'm reachable, and I am present and engaged with the community as well. So going to meetings, making sure that I'm visiting community districts, making sure that I'm engaged at all times with the community.
So as part of this recruitment process, the town conducted a survey of police department personnel. And while a majority of respondents indicated that morale is positive in the department, a notable minority expressed concerns regarding morale, communication, and organizational culture. What do you take away from that feedback, and how would you work to promote trust, accountability, and a positive culture among all ranks in the department?
So I can say, and not to throw any shade but I lived this. We had this issue in Duxbury where we had a divide when I first started, and we progressively improved that, and we're now at the point where I've never seen morale as high. And the way we did that, and the way I would work with Westwood to do that, would be to make sure there's clear, defined policies and procedures, clear, defined rules, and clear, defined expectations. I think when expectations aren't clear and there's no accountability within the department, that's frustrating. That's frustrating to officers that do the right thing every day, and that doesn't hold officers that have maybe decided that at this point in their career they can back off a little bit from their responsibilities, or maybe they've been frustrated over a bypass on a promotion or a some other issue internally or externally. We need to hold officers accountable. And they expect that. And believe it or not, they want that. They want to make sure that they're all held accountable, and they're holding me accountable, or whoever the chief of police may be is being held accountable as well. We also need to focus on making sure that they feel supported, not only physically, mentally, but also with their career. They want to make sure that they have their career goals are being met. There's plenty of training out there. There's plenty of ways to give an officer an other duty outside of just patrol. Not every officer is going to make detective if that's what they want. Not every officer is going to get promoted, but there's always opportunities to give officers other duties that are in line with what their career goals and expectations are. And using various forms of training that's out there, a lot of it is free. Not all of it, but a lot of it is free through the state. You can get those officers different certifications. And maybe we find out that, hey, we have officers that are interested in crisis intervention, and they want to work with counselors to go out there and help people with substance abuse issues or help people with mental health issues. You might have officers that you never really realized they wanted to be a school resource officer, but we have one in place. We don't have a position for them, but we can get them certified through post and become a school resource officer to fill in the gaps when that SRO is not available, and to assist with other programs. You can send officers to different investigations trainings. Cybercrime is not going away anytime soon, and there's plenty of training out there, and there's officers that would really benefit from understanding the different avenues that criminals use in the cyber world. So there's lots of things you can do to improve morale. But to recap, it's accountability, ensuring that the officers feel supported through training, wellness programs, both physical and mental, and making sure that their career goals are met. I can tell you right now that we've really revamped our wellness program internally in the department. We have a great thing going. We encourage our officers to make sure that they're physically exercising to kind of break down the stresses of the day and of the job. We make sure that we have avenues for them to seek mental health help if they need it. And we also created internally, we have a peer support system. And that peer support system is another way where not only can you give officers an avenue of career progression by putting somebody on that team, but now you have officers with a friendly face that can go to somebody they know and can trust and look for help. So there's lots of avenues to make sure that the department feels united and they can move forward and feel like they're getting the progression they want. As long as we're being fair, we hold them accountable, and we make sure we support them.
As a follow-up to that, as a new chief coming in from another department, what would you do to instill trust in members of the department, in you?
So I think, that's obviously a challenge coming in from an outside agency, and trying to, I'm not looking to be revolutionary. I guess I would be evolutionary, take what's good, and from what I've seen, that there's tons of it. Take what's good, get the feedback from the officers and the other staff in the department and the community and the community leaders, and see how we can continue to improve the agency. Make sure that they feel heard. I think the first 30 to 60 days, it's going to be a lot of spending time just listening. You're not going to be making changes right off the bat. You have to listen to the officers. You have to understand, there's no excuse for a chief of police in a department the size of Westwood PD to not know what each officer's background is, what each officer's career goals are. I want to make sure I know that so that I can gear the rest of their career towards what their goals are and what their needs are and what their wants are. So listening to them, understanding them, that's going to be a huge bridge between, coming from the outside and trying to move forward.
Thank you.
I have a follow-up as well, Mary Ann. Lieutenant, do your SROs get involved with any of the school discipline?
So our SROs do not get involved in school discipline. There is a clear divide where SROs cannot get involved in school discipline. So if there's criminal activity, criminal action, then the SROs will handle that. But if it's school discipline, the SROs cannot get involved. That doesn't mean they can't counsel. No, they can counsel, they can assist, but they would work with the family. But when it comes to school discipline, the school would have to take care of that.
I have a question on traffic. It's a two-part question. Traffic consistency is one of the most common concerns that we've heard from our residents. I'm sure you have as well. Tell us about your experience with traffic enforcement. Where do we draw the line between educating drivers and enforcement? Then I have a follow-up to that.
Sure. So I think just because the communities share so many similarities, that is a common theme in Duxbury as well. And the way we've approached it is the department, we've sought out capital funding to gain several traffic signboards, radar boards. We've actually worked with the town to put additional radar signs throughout town in the hotspot areas. So at least it's something, it's a little flashing light that displays the current speed of somebody with the speed limit. Fortunately, sometimes people try to test, see how high those can go, so we have to work with that too. But we also we've invested in systems that actually can track the speed data for us and track the amount of cars traveling, and we can see what the trends are, see what the time, and that way I can now apply my enforcement in the best way possible that is financially responsible. I'm not just wasting money on overtime on random times and days that aren't really fitting the criteria of when the traffic problem exists, but I'll use data to actually apply that appropriately. The other things we've done, and the state has traffic grants for us to put officers out there in overtime. Right now, we have a big seasonal push for traffic enforcement, and every month's a different theme. So, we've had hands-free theme. So, our enforcement's going to focus on people using cell phones without a hands-free setup. Then we'll have speed. Then we'll have, just different things like that. Bicyclist safety. So we will focus our enforcement that way using grant funding. And that's a great tool because the officers, well, they like the overtime opportunity. We break it down into 4-hour blocks to make it manageable, and it doesn't cost the town of Westwood anything. So it's really a win-win for everyone, and it's putting those officers out there. And as I mentioned before, another thing is making sure that the police are present and participating in those committee meetings where we're talking about traffic, bicyclist, and pedestrian safety. We want to make sure that we are a vital part of that. In Duxbury, we're actually a voting member on that. So the way we've handled it.
The second part of my question is, do you have a partner with neighboring communities as far as speed enforcement, traffic enforcement?
So we work with our neighboring communities all the time for all sorts of enforcement. I can't say that, well, no, I'll take that back. We have had an issue. We've worked with Marshfield in the past with heavy trucks going through Duxbury into Marshfield and vice versa for beach work. And that is something we did work with the town of Marshfield on, having a mutual understanding of how we were going to enforce the speeds and the truck traffic. So yes, it's absolutely something that can be done. We've done it. You know, most towns will, you know, they deal with their traffic issue, but working with other towns makes sense, especially in where you guys are just surrounded by everything here with the, you know, the highway access and everything. It does make sense to make sure that other towns know what you're doing, what your concerns are, and they understand vice versa. And having those partnerships with the neighboring agencies is crucial, not just for speed enforcement, but for everyday enforcement. You know, I would imagine that mutual aid is used pretty heavily in Westwood, and as well, you know, us providing mutual aid to towns like Dover and Norwood. I would say that making sure that you have those partnerships in place for all types of enforcement is important.
Can you give me an example of the truck enforcement with neighboring towns?
Sure. So for that particular instance, I actually would go to the Marshfield highway safety meetings to present Duxbury's concerns on the issue. And I brought our DPW director so that we were on the same page. And we presented the concerns that we were getting and the feedback we were getting from our residents so they understood. And then we were there to listen to what their feedback and their concerns were, and we can kind of put our heads together and figure out the best route.
Thank you. I'm good. Thanks, Aaron.
Okay, good. So as chief, one of the most important responsibilities is managing personnel. And in an earlier answer, you had sort of mentioned how you develop leadership opportunities within the department and encourage professional development even when promotional opportunities are limited. How do you ensure fairness and equity and impartiality in hiring, promoting, mentoring, and discipline? And sort of part two of that question is, how would you maintain trust and morale if employees disagree or are disappointed by decisions, particularly regarding promotions or discipline?
Yeah, I think setting the expectations right away is important. Setting the expectations, setting the boundaries, setting the rules, working with the union leadership so that they understand it and they're on board. Ultimately, most promotional processes up to a certain level are usually dictated by some language in the contracts. So making sure the union understands what their role is, and they understand what the expectation is, and all the union members understand what the expectations are. That way it's out there. There should be no secrets to the promotional process. We've used the assessment process to do our promotions, and, you know, some people feel that, you know, that I've heard all sorts of things. I've heard that the chiefs have a say on how, you know, who they want to move forward in the assessment process. I know that's not the case, but that's the feeling. So making sure that the union members are part of that discussion when you put together what does that promotional process look like, so they understand. They should be able to see what the department is looking for. They should be able to see what, hey, this is what we're expecting from a supervisor. This is what we're expecting from a lieutenant. And let there be no secrets. It doesn't have to be some secretive process of how we make a selection. It should be pretty clear, and it's something that, you know, we can get them involved in so they feel like they had a say on how that process works and how it looks. And yes, will some people be upset that they didn't get promoted? Of course. The way you manage that is basically by making sure they understand what give them their feedback. Understand what the shortcomings were, understand why another person was selected over them, so they understand what we were looking for, and then provide them the opportunities to bridge those gaps. Make sure they have the opportunity to address what they were lacking, and don't just leave it up to them. You know, encourage them to go to X, Y, or Z training. Encourage leadership training. There's plenty of it out there, and, you know, we should make sure we're focusing on building those officers up rather than just, you know, making them feel like, all right, they didn't get that job, they didn't deserve it, let's just push them aside. No, we have a career to make out of this officer. We've invested a lot of money in them, we've invested a lot of time in them, and they're devoted to this town. Let's make sure they want to stay with us.
So Westwood values collaboration between its police department and our schools, as well as with community partners like the Human Rights Task Force and the Community Coalition to Combat Hate Speech. Would you please discuss your view of the school resource officer role, how schools, police, and the community should balance information sharing with student privacy, and how law enforcement should respond with respect to incidents involving hate speech with our youth?
So as a former SRO, I'm a little biased towards this. I will say that a school resource officer can be an absolutely invaluable tool for the community. I actually advocated and eventually was able to get the town of Duxbury to approve a second resource officer, so that we had two, one for the elementary schools and one for the high school and middle school, to further embrace that approach. I think that making sure officers integrate themselves in a way that's approachable is important. Make sure that they're working with families is important. You know, I've seen different methods of SROs where, you know, some love to just go into classrooms and do some sort of programming. Some love to, they just want to do the other side of things where they're working with families in need and things like that. I think you need a combination of it all. You need an SRO that is looking to engage with the community, engage with the youth, also provide programming. You know, things like junior police academies are an excellent tool. It gets kids that are, you know, interested, maybe not in being a police officer, but just kind of curious, and it gives parents a little break for a week, you know, if they can send their kids off to a summer camp at the police department. It's a way for us to kind of integrate the community, let them know what, you know, our expectations are, the things we do. It gets the kids interested, but also gets them comfortable. And I think that comfort is crucial, because we want to make sure that our youth, they know that we're here to help them. We're not here just to make arrests or just to stop somebody and write tickets. That's not our job. Our job is to help, and we want to make sure that's clear, and that message is being sent out. When it comes to working with other community groups, you know, it really goes the same way. We want to make sure that all different types of groups they feel welcome in Westwood, and we are representing them in a positive way, you know, through the diversity of the department, through the diversity of the way we train our officers. And when it comes to hate speech, that there has to be a no tolerance level. You know, that's something that we would have to investigate as a police department, and there's going to be certain thresholds that it becomes something that the police cannot charge for statutorily. And I'm not saying that criminal charges is always the best route, but, you know, we're going to have to investigate it. Hate speech cannot be tolerated. It just can't.
All right, Lieutenant, what is your experience, and just briefly, in a unionized environment? How have you approached labor management and collective bargaining? And can you give us some examples of, and you did earlier, but I'd like to hear a little bit more about the peer support, EAP, wellness, those things, which is really at the forefront of a lot of policing these days.
It sure is. So I can say that for my union experience, I've served as a union negotiator, I've served as a union treasurer, and I've served as a union president. So I understand what the unions are looking for. I've served at it both at the patrol, sergeant, and lieutenant's level. And I've had to work on the other side of the fence too, on the administrative side, when there's disciplinary issues or what have you. So I definitely have experience dealing with the union, understanding what their goals are, understanding the negotiation process, and working with the town to find best solutions to different problems that are internal. I will say, as a lieutenant, I'm usually the first or second step in the disciplinary process in Duxbury. We try to gear it towards coaching We use a progressive disciplinary policy, which is important. You know, officers should, depending on the circumstance, should always have an opportunity to correct themselves. There's obviously certain things that, you know, integrity issues that can't be tolerated, but for the most part, you know, mistakes of the head, they usually can be addressed and fixed, and we can move forward in a positive manner. So I've had opportunities to do that, discipline from anything from, you know, tardiness to arguments to mistakes out on the road, and all the way up to we've had be part of a termination process. So I've seen the gamut, and I understand what the needs of the town are and how to meet those needs and how to document them appropriately. And I think that's one of the biggest things that maybe hasn't always been our forte, is documenting issues appropriately. But when it comes down to it, if you don't have the documentation of a past history, now all of a sudden an officer makes a significant mistake that needs to result in some sort of significant discipline or possibly even a termination, not having that documentation is going to sink the town's argument for any type of movement. So making sure that our supervisors, our lieutenants, and the chief is documenting that progressive disciplinary process, that's crucial.
One quick question. How long have you been on the job?
Total 18 years.
We're doing well on time. I want to ask a follow-up. It's not quite on point
Yeah.
with what you just answered, Lieutenant, but your CV indicates under your professional experience that among your accomplishments in Duxbury that you, quote, drastically improved recruitment and retention.
Yes.
Could you explain what you mean by that, please?
Sure. So we felt that, like any other police agency, we had a recruitment issue. We had a retention issue. We had officers that were transferring out, leaving for other careers, and we also had an issue with gaining anyone interested in becoming a police officer. Whether it was being a police officer in Duxbury or just a police officer in general, I don't know. But we knew there was an issue, so the biggest thing we needed to change was the culture. We drastically changed the culture in our department, and doing I know, Joe, I know you mentioned you wanted a little bit on the wellness stuff, so I'll kind of touch on that too. I apologize. So by creating a internal wellness program, we did things like we invested in Cortico, and they have an app for police agencies that allow officers instant access to various resources. Now, not just the EAP type of resources where it's, you know, they're having suicidal thoughts, or maybe they're having trouble at home with their domestic relationship or things like that. But it's also simple things like a sleep app to help them sleep better. I will tell you right now that police officers, we have an awful sleep schedule. You know, some of us have to sleep during the day, some of us sleep in the afternoon. You know, there's always those overtime shifts that officers are trying to grab or detail, and it's just our sleep schedule is awful. So trying to gain quality, good sleep is, you know, is important. And it has access to tools like that. But then it also has access to, you know, critical incident tools. You know, if there is a critical incident, how can we approach it as a department? So that's been one of the things we've used. We've kind of created some brand ambassadors with our department. When we started getting a couple officers that were on board, word slowly started to spread out that, hey, Duxbury, they got their things together here, and they are treating their officers fair. Officers are getting the training that they need and want, and, you know, it's not necessarily because there's all this slew of promotions, it's because officers are getting put in charge of X program, Y program, or they are now all of a sudden, you know, certified in some sort of technique or skill, and they can help teach at academies, and they can, you know, go work with different groups like our CIT team. They work with counselors and go out to families that are, maybe someone's having a mental health crisis or a substance abuse crisis, and They go out there, plain clothes, meet with the families, meet with the person in crisis, try to offer them services. That's not the typical police role, but it is now. You know, it is now. And different services like that have really kind of increased the avenues officers have to improve themselves. And that word has kind of spread, and that has allowed us to continuously gain applicants. I can tell you right now, and I've told Connor that I have applicants on my stack of applications on my desk for a job we haven't posted. And these are all officers that are looking to transfer from elsewhere. And there's a couple of people that they're not police officers yet, but are interested. I haven't posted anything. And it's just because of that word of mouth. It's because of, hey, you know, they see our officers out on the street and they're professional. They handle themselves well. They present the department well. They represent the town well. That's what we want. We want those brand ambassadors to draw in those candidates. Internally, our, you know, that peer support group is vital. You know, we've used them several times, and there's opportunities for not only an officer to use one of their actual coworkers for peer support, but in the circumstances where they don't feel comfortable going to them, we have a network of other peer support officers outside of the agency so that they can go to them as well, just so that there's always an avenue for someone to get help. One of the great tools we've used, and you know, I've used it. I would say 90% of our agencies using it is in the officer's contract. They are allowed to have 1 hour of workout time on their shifts. That no one ever used that when I started. It just wasn't a thing. It was in the contract, but nobody did it. Nobody could be bothered. We've really pressed the officers to engage in that, and I can tell you that that has improved productivity. That has improved officers' mental health. You can just see the difference in the way that officers handle themselves. It's a moment of stress release. It is good for their physical well-being. It's good for their mental health. And you know, I can understand that there's a drawback of you're taking someone out of patrol duties, but we're making sure that we're appropriately staffed so we can manage that 1 hour that they're outside of patrol duties. And if something happens where we need that extra officer, they suit up and get right back on the road. It has not been an issue for us. If anything, it's been one of our biggest draws. We've significantly improved our gym equipment, and you know, the union's really taken the forefront on that, and they've done a great job of making this part of the overall officer wellness process, and it's been a huge success. So I think that's another avenue of exploration, is to make sure that the officers have those opportunities to keep themselves mentally and physically fit on the job.
Thank you.
Just touching on communications, how important is timely communication with the public during both day-to-day police operations and also critical incidents? And as a follow-up, what role should social media and other communication tools play, in your opinion, in a modern police department to build trust, share information, and engage with the community? And sort of as a subset of that, I would sort of be curious about how that applies with respect to an incident with the schools, in terms of communicating with the school versus the whole community.
So to try to break that down, I will say that, you know, if you allow any type of information to live in a vacuum, speculation is going to win 100% of the time. People are going to make assumptions, and rumor mill is going to start. So getting out in front of instances is important. Now, there's obviously certain types of instances that we can't release all the information out there, but we can always release a little bit, even if it's as much as there is police activity in this area of Canton Street. You know, please stay away from the area. We will update when we can. Sometimes that's all the community wants to hear. You know, they see, you know, 3, 4, 5 cruisers and a couple ambulances, and now everyone's wondering what happened, and it's gonna, in everyone's mind, it can be anything from a horrible crash to a shooting to a robbery to whatever, but now you're letting people just kind of make those assumptions. So let's get that information out there. When we can provide the information, we break it down with, legally what we are allowed to provide and get it out there. I think the town administrator needs to be apprised of that information. Sometimes we might need to get town council involved so that we're releasing only the appropriate information. But using tools like Facebook, X, and Smart 911, and whatever other resources that we have is important to push that information out there. What we've done in Duxbury is that every supervisor has access, and in their cruiser carries a phone that has access to our social media accounts, so that when they need to put information out, as little as a road closure or some sort of incidents to stay away from, our supervisors have the right and responsibility to do that. So it's right there. There's no downtime. There's no waiting for it. When we need to put out more information, we do that, but we do that with the assistance of town administration and legal counsel to make sure that we're putting out the right stuff. We're not putting out things that we shouldn't be putting out, but we've gone through extensive training on how to do this. So for the most part, we never get anything kicked back, but we want to make sure that everyone's on board and the community message is the same. Sometimes the fire department might have they put out something a little different than the police department. We want to make sure everyone's on board with the same message. So that's critical. So that's the instant stuff. And then we get to press releases, which is along the same idea. We want to make sure that we're putting out information. People need to understand, hey, you know what, our police department does some good work. Let's promote that. And in the case that it's an instance where the community assumption is that the police officer did something wrong, let's get ahead of that too. Let's let them know that we are working towards a process. We have a process in place, and we're going to investigate, and we're going to look into it. And we understand the community is anxious about it, but we're going to do our time and make sure it's done thoroughly and done correctly. But we need to get that message out there as well. So I think it's important to make sure that the Westwood Police Department has the tools to communicate with the public, and we're revamping those. I think it's important to put officers in charge of our social media accounts to put out the good stuff, put out the parade messaging on Memorial Day to make sure that, hey, these streets are going to be closed as a reminder, expect traffic delays, and put out the messaging about e-bikes to make sure they understand, hey, these are the rules about e-bikes, a reminder, make sure your kids know. That constant information, that community engagement back and forth. It doesn't have to all come from the chief of police. We can get our officers involved in this, and that's what we've done in Duxbury, and it's great because at any hour of the day, I can have an officer that's able to send out a message to the public and communicate and be there to, kind of calm public nerves, but also to spread the messages of the things that we're doing, the things that we're aware of, different programs and initiatives that we're working on, and it just supports that overall community engagement with the police department.
And just to follow up, how do you coordinate with the school department in terms of if there's some kind of law enforcement issue that
Yeah.
occurs at
So
the school?
when that happens, we do work with the superintendent to try to unify a message. We do push, depending on the age, there's very limited information the police can give out, and the schools obviously are going to approach it the same way with the information they give out. But we want to make sure the message is clear, that we're aware of the incident. If there's an incident of safety concern, that message has to get out there immediately. The schools usually have their own alerting systems in place, and that's something I have to explore. I'm not exactly sure what Westwood has in place, but we've tried various amounts of different alerting systems, and we've finally settled on what we have, and there's always room to improve. But making sure that the message from the school and the police department is in line with each other is important. But ultimately, those parents need to be put at ease. Let them know that, X, Y, or Z happened. We're working on it. And if it's a safety issue, that message has to be immediate. We can't, you're going to get so much, even if we feel that we handled it, we knew what the problem is, parents are going to be upset if they don't get that information and they don't get to make the choices about their son or daughter.
Just have a follow-up relative to schools, although a little off topic on communication. Obviously, preparedness in the schools for safety issues is of paramount importance in any community. What role, if any, would you have as chief of police in Westwood in ensuring that we are prepared for any crisis in the schools.
So as we speak, we are planning our annual in-school safety training for our officers right now. So that's something that I assume Westwood does, but it's a program that I would look at and try to make sure that we are always doing what we can to be better at it. Working with the fire department is so critical in instances like this. It can't be understated how important it is for us to integrate with the fire department, with our training and our response. So whenever it's an issue at the school, whether it's an active shooter incident, some sort of medical incident, or some other form of violence, there's going to be fire involved. There's going to be medical involved. So making sure that our officers are trained to work with them, and our firefighters are trained to work with officers, and they're trained to understand what that triage looks like, what our goals and our responsibilities are, and we know what their goals and their responsibilities are, and making sure that we're working together on that. When it's a major instance and we're taking in officers from other communities to assist, we need to make sure that we know how to work with them as well. So establishing those partnerships beforehand, knowing what their capabilities are, because every department's going to be able to offer different types of tools and different assets, knowing what their capabilities are when they come in and how to deploy them is going to be important. So understanding the area capabilities, but also making sure that you are constantly working with and training with the fire department, because it wouldn't just be the school issues. There could be an issue anywhere. In one of the businesses, there could be just at a medical call. Officers should know how to work with the fire department during certain things. If there's a fire, the fire department relies on the police to shut down roads accordingly, and that should be a coordination that happens beforehand, not when we're in crisis during the instance. We should already have our plans in place. We should already know what our roles are, and we should already understand each other's capabilities, but also builds camaraderie between the two agencies, and we want to make sure that we have that so that everyone's working together. It just creates a smoother process in town to move forward.
Thank you.
One of your favorite topics. Let's talk about budget preparation. Tell us about your experience with budgets, prioritizing expenditures, communicating resource needs to the elected officials, as well as working with the town administrator, select board, and our finance committee.
So
What are your secrets on budgeting?
So I think because I have a little background in business, and I have my MPA, and I just got kind of thrust forward into the budget process in Duxbury. That's been, I've kind of held a key role, not just as a lieutenant, but even prior to that, I've just always held a key role with the process. So I've been involved with the capital projects, with the grant process, with bidding, with the fiscal year planning. So I have, luckily, I guess, had my hands in some of that for many years. I hate to say luckily, but it depends. So when it comes to fiscal year planning, we've actually started already. We start early. We want to forecast out what our needs are. We usually put a 5-year forecast out in general, at least for our capital needs. Our biggest capital expenditure is always going to be fleet for us, and I want to understand what our fleet needs are going to be, but I also want to make sure the community knows that, hey, we're doing everything we can to maximize the useful life of our fleet. We have a significant fleet program. We have a sergeant assigned as, we call him the fleet sergeant, and they maintain the records of all of our vehicles so that we know when we need to rotate them into different types of positions. So some vehicles are when it's getting towards the end of its useful life, maybe we only use that vehicles for special circumstances or details. If we see a vehicle that all of a sudden is getting really high in mileage despite its age, we'll rotate that out to a different assignment to kind of balance out what our fleet looks like and to mitigate the overall cost to the town. And then when we go and determine what we need, We sit down as a group, we kind of walk through what our needs are, what we could have used last year, what we project that we might need next year. We go through the different types of vehicles available to us and balance out what the officers' preferences are for a vehicle. I mean, it is their office for 10, 16 hours a day. So we want to take that into consideration. We also, our biggest, the most important factor for us is their safety. So we want to make sure that it meets all the ratings that it needs to meet for what their duties are, what their assignments are. The way we do it is we assign 2 officers per cruiser. That way, those officers kind of own that cruiser. They take better care of it. It lasts longer. It's cleaner. It looks better. It rides better. It's just a better way to handle it rather than just assign one cruiser to one area of town and then it just rotates constantly 24/7. We did that before and it didn't work. So projecting that out and then presenting that to our finance committees, making sure they understand this is what we need, this is why we need it, here's the cost, and here's the equipment that goes in the car, here's the why all that equipment goes in the car. It's one thing to just show a contract pricing on something. Anyone can look at that and they can see the different contract pricing of the cars, but why are we selecting this particular vehicle? I'll give you the breakdown. Here's the why. And I'm not the smartest person in the room all the time, so I want to hear what you think too. I want to hear what the committee thinks. Why shouldn't we go for that route? What's better? I'll explore that. I've done that in the past plenty of times. We've, done capital requests for new firearms, and the way I broke that down to the committee was, we have firearms that are 15 to 20 years old right now. Yeah, can a firearm last 25, 30 years? For sure. But it's going to require a significant amount of maintenance. Here's the cost for all the replacement parts, and here's the overtime cost it's going to incur for our armorers to take each of those firearms in, replace those appropriate parts, then test them. And now we still have an old firearm that doesn't have the newest technology in it, the newest safety features in it, and it just costs you the same amount that I could have had a brand new piece of equipment with the latest and greatest safety features and targeting features for officers. So it's breaking that down, I think, is the important piece when you're presenting any type of capital project, because you want the community feedback, but they also want to know that, hey, we're not just throwing darts at a dartboard and saying that's the piece of equipment we want this year. They want to know why, and they want to know how we're going to use it. When it comes to things like technology, like drones, they're expensive, but I can tell you right now they're invaluable, and I can explain several situations where we've successfully used a drone to locate a missing child or to locate a suspect, and the resources we've saved and the heartache we've saved from a $20,000 expense one year on a capital project. The community appreciates that. They appreciate that we use the equipment, they appreciate that we understand why it's important, and they appreciate the feedback back and forth.
We have, okay,
one quick-
very briefly, we've got 2 minutes left.
Quick question. How many patrol cars, how many unmarked cars in Duxbury?
So right now, we have a total of 26 vehicles. We have, I think it's 18 patrol marked, and then the rest are unmarked.
Thank you. Thanks, Mary Ann.
You bet. So we've done well on time. We have 2 minutes left. This is your 4th and final interview here in Westwood. Please let us know what else you would like to tell this board and the community about you as we hire our next chief of police.
So first, I just want to thank everyone. This has been quite the process. It seems very thorough, very lengthy, but that's great. That's great. That shows me that Westwood is a community that I'd want to work for. Someone that they really put a lot of thought into this, and I feel that I'm ready to take on this role as well. I've hopefully shown throughout the interview process and through my resume, my CV, that you've seen that I've progressed throughout my career. I've been able to have a handle on anything from investigations to community relations to budgeting and to the overall morale and improvement of my own agency, working through the accreditation process, making sure that we remain accredited, working with our supervisors to keep our officers engaged, and leading our department into the future of whatever the world presents to us. So I think I'm ready to take that into the chief of police position, and I find that Westwood, I honestly, I don't think I could find a better town for me to jump into that role in. It just fits everything that I'm used to, everything I'm comfortable with, and everything I'm looking forward to. So it's been an absolute pleasure learning about the town. It's been a pleasure learning about all the department heads that I've been able to meet and all the departments within town. And I wish you the best in the selection, and I hope whoever you select is the right person. Obviously, I hope that is me, but whoever it is, I'm sure you're in good hands based on the process.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Everyone, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks very much. Yeah, absolutely.
Deputy Superintendent O'Neill for the board.
Nice to meet you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. Mary, you're there. Erin.
Good to see you.
Good to see you.
More officially, good morning, Deputy Superintendent O'Neill. My name again is Mary Ann LeBlanc Cummings. I'm the chair of the Westwood Select Board, and with me are my colleagues Joe Prevotera and Aaron Sibley. We are delighted that you are with us this morning, and we thank you for your interest in the Chief of Police position. The board has reserved 1 hour for this interview, and we have 10 prepared questions. So we'll ask you to please try to limit your answers to about 3 minutes so that we will have time for follow-up and discussion. And you will be given an opportunity for a brief closing statement at the end.
Okay.
Okay. So to start off, I will ask you, what has drawn you to apply for the position as Chief of Police in Westwood? And in your opinion, what are the meaningful similarities and differences between your current community and Westwood? And are there specific practices or policies from your current department that you believe would benefit Westwood, and why?
Sure. So I've been very fortunate to spend my law enforcement career thus far, 20 years, in Brookline, which has been a phenomenal experience. I've had phenomenal mentors along the way. And as I've grown professionally and risen through various supervisor and leadership positions, I've been fortunate enough to get a glimpse into the higher echelon of leadership at the executive level of law enforcement. In my current employer in the town of Brookline, the form of government, similar in that there's a select board and a town administrator, but the model is what's referred to or known as a weak chief model, which means that the select board are the police commissioners and are the implementers of all policy, or the approvers of all policy and procedure for the police department. I've found I've seen some of the challenges in implementing change within a police department, given the steps and number of personnel involved to implement that change. And I looked into Westwood when the posting came out. It's a town I've always loved, and honestly, my wife and I tried to move here 15 years ago. Couldn't find a house with enough yard, and so we ended up in Medfield, right down the street. But a great town, and the form of government allows the chief of police to implement policy and to really lead a police department. Not that the community and the select board shouldn't have input. I think that's very important. But at times, the ability for a law enforcement executive with experience to implement change in a deliberate and expedited fashion is sometimes required. And Westwood allows that. And so I see a phenomenal opportunity to really lead a police department in Westwood, whereas it can be a little bit more cumbersome or bureaucratic in the form of government at my current employer. I don't know if I answered all the components of that, but
Are there specific practices or policies within your current department that you would want to bring to Westwood, or you think would benefit Westwood?
sure. So, you know, probably the biggest opportunity for growth that I see within the police department in Westwood is the opportunity to connect with the community through social media engagement. I currently lead our community service division in Brookline, and within that falls the public information office and as well as our social media team. Many folks are familiar with Sergeant Rob. He's become somewhat of a social media phenom, and he does a great work, does a phenomenal job, and taking some of what I've learned in my current position in terms of engaging with the community via social media and having that persistent presence to advertise and communicate. And I think it just opens so many doors, whether it's for recruitment or building trust with the community so that members of the community can connect with the police department. I don't want to say the days of flipping open the morning newspaper are over, but I think the majority of folks tend to flip the phone open first thing in the morning and start scrolling through. And the police department has an opportunity to be seen and be visible and hear from the community through the variety of social media apps that are out there.
Thank you. Joe?
Okay. Deb, tell me about your thoughts on ethical community policing, what it means to you, and how do you ensure policing practices reflect community values while maintaining public safety?
Sure. So I believe that transparency is key to building that. One of the challenges I've found in going through this extensive process has been the ability to find Westwood Police Department information, including policies and procedures. And so the ability to have those out and open to the public allows the public to see and review those and then advocate for change. I would be a chief that would have my door open to members of the public to voice concerns, and I would expect that the same of my officers, that they're engaged in the community and listening to the community feedback, and when change is warranted, then it's implemented. I find that oftentimes conversations with members of the public really help inform what members of the public may think needs to be changed about a police department. Oftentimes lacks some of the base knowledge, some of the foundational knowledge of Mass General laws, things such as Police Officer Standards and Training Commission requirements, accreditation requirements. Oftentimes things are, implemented on us as police officers or police departments, and members of the community may not agree with that, but it's outside the sphere of our control within a police department. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay.
This question, actually, I'm pleased you've already touched on some of this, but our community feedback in Westwood has consistently emphasized increasing the visibility of our police chief and our police officers, accessibility and engagement as areas of future growth and a priority. And you've spoken about social media, which makes me very happy. How would you strengthen relationships between the department and the community, and specifically yourself? How would you increase your visibility and accessibility in the community?
Sure. So I think the town of Westwood has a number of events every year that are phenomenal. I've attended Westwood Day. I've attended the fireworks on New Year's. So there's some key staple events that I think are critical that the police department be part of the fabric, integral to that, not just from a public safety standpoint, but also the opportunity to just walk around and engage with the community. That would be an opportunity I would look forward to. I would hope to expand on that. In my current assignment, we are in the depths of planning National Night Out, which is a national effort to get police departments out into the community. It's the first Tuesday in August every year, and so it's really essentially it would be like a scaled down Westwood Day, maybe just not quite as robust, but really run, led, and facilitated by the police department. So, there's those major events, but then I think it's the day in and day out opportunities that you have to engage with the community, and that starts with the community at large. But I think the bookends of that are really with our youth engagement and our senior citizens, and having good, strong ties and relationships in both of those communities, whether it's the schools or the senior centers. I think those populations are a great opportunity to engage with and hear their concerns. Westwood is very fortunate to have a fairly low crime rate and a very low violent crime rate, which is important and critical. But I think that there is oftentimes a significant level of, I see the police department's role as reducing the fear of crime. And in a town like Westwood, national news or national events or even just regional or events that occur within the Commonwealth can have an impact on community members' fear of crime. And so our ability to be visible and provide that level of safety and security to the community is really critical to what we do as a police department. Yeah.
And how would you do that on a day in, day out basis as chief?
So I think hearing the community concerns, whether it's rush hour traffic cutting through side streets or a youth complaint for utilizing parks after dark or things like that. I think addressing those community quality of life concerns in a very proactive and responsive way is critical. I mean, that's the foundation of law enforcement, really. And then just being visible. So having enough patrol officers staffed on the street to do the job. At the foundation of what we do as police, it's that uniformed 911 response, but the uniformed presence within the community is really critical. So having them at areas, intersections, business areas, whether it's University Ave or Islington seems to be growing and developing pretty quickly as well, or the center of town. And I'm always, as I make my laborious morning commute into Brookline every morning, I come through 109 and I'm always appreciative of when I see the Westwood Cruiser sitting in one of the parking lots there, whether it's across from the Mobile or the old real estate office there, because I often see commuters cutting through the private lots and seeing the Westwood officers take action and try to deter that and stop those cars. It's not just about educating the one violator of the violation. It's all the other commuters, it's all the other residents seeing that traffic stop, seeing the action being taken that has an impact. And so I think encouraging that throughout the Westwood Police Department would be a way for that ripple effect to be felt in the community, that Westwood PD is listening and we are responsive to the community needs and we're visible. And if you need us, give us a call. We're always here.
And just as another quick follow-up on that, as chief, what would you personally do on a day-to-day basis to be visible in the community?
So I would spend time within, with local businesses. I would organize community meetings, especially right off the bat, to really get an understanding. I think the first 90 days, is critical to hearing what the community and what the business owners need and what their concerns are. So having those scheduled, deliberate meetings, I think are essential to hearing the community feedback. I've obviously read the survey results, the survey that was conducted prior to this process. I think that those are important, but I think having the opportunity to have a dialogue with members opens up the opportunity to expand upon those and get into the specifics of what's needed and what they're looking for. On a day-to-day basis, I'm in Westwood all the time. I love the businesses here. I got my hair cut here in Westwood yesterday. Been going to the same barber for 10 years. So, and I would continue practices such as that, and I think that opens up the opportunity. Wearing a uniform as the chief, I think, is important because it provides people the opportunity. I don't think that community members or business owners always recognize, whether it's elected officials or others in the public, and they might want the opportunity to engage with the chief of police, but they don't know who the chief of police is. And I would work to try to make myself the face of the police department. At the end of the day, my officers would be the extension of we're all one team, and so my hope would be that my officers are out engaging just as much as I am, and providing that feedback up through the chain of command.
I appreciate your mentioning the survey, and as you know, a survey was conducted as part of this recruitment process of both community members and also within the department itself. And while a majority of respondents within the department indicated that morale is positive, a notable minority expressed concerns regarding morale, communication, and organizational culture. What do you take away from that feedback, and how would you work to promote trust, accountability, and positive culture among the ranks of the department?
Sure. So I think it starts with me. It would start with me as the chief, and setting that example as a leader means being there day in and day out, being involved, and setting the example in work ethic and integrity, obviously, and some of those foundational values. But having the opportunity to meet with and speak with officers, both one-on-one and as a group, I think provides various levels of input. So what I've found in my experience is, I could come into Westwood on day one and host a meeting with all the members of the police department and try to solicit their feedback and their input. And what inevitably will happen is one or two voices will kind of carry the day. They'll kind of lead the conversation, and that's valuable input, and that's valuable to hear what their sentiments are and how they feel about things going well or not going well, and what needs to be improved. But the one-on-one conversations, the opportunity to sit down and meet with each individual officer, I think opens up the door for more transparency or more honesty amongst officers. So really getting into the details of what the grievances are and what the complaints are, I think can be beneficial to try to address it. I think first-line supervisors, first-line leaders at the sergeant and at times at the lieutenant level are critical to developing and having the right culture, the inclusive culture, and trying to avoid decisiveness. Throughout my law enforcement career, I don't think there's a police department in the nation that doesn't have some form of cliques or different social groups, and I think that's okay. I think my role as the chief is to hear from those different groups, make sure that one group is not boxed out because they align with someone or don't align with someone. I think that's the opportunity as an outside chief that I have, is to come in with, without some of that knowledge of various groups and cliques, and really take all the information in and then make well-informed decisions in the benefit of the entire police department or the town.
If I could ask you to briefly respond to this follow-up so we stay on track.
Sure.
But could you just address, Deputy Superintendent, how your experience in both your current department and the military has prepared you to do that?
Sure. So I have, I'll reference the military, as, you know, that was at a young age. Probably 26 was the first time that I had to remove someone from military service. And so I think that's, throughout my career, I've had to have difficult conversations with people. Those are never pleasant. They're always uncomfortable in the sense that you're changing someone's life. And so I'm not afraid of those difficult conversations. I've been doing it throughout my career in the military and the police, and so I think I don't shy away from those challenging conversations.
And just for members of the community who may not have read your CV as we have, could you just briefly describe what your military experience has been, so
Sure.
members are aware?
Sure. So I enlisted in the Army National Guard in 2000 to pay for college and hopefully a stepping stone to get on the police department. I turned out to love it, and I received my commission in 2005. I deployed to Iraq in 2007, 2008. I was a platoon leader of 26 soldiers on a route clearance mission there for a year. I returned, and I've held positions as company commander 3 times, operations officer for battalion and brigades, so large organizations, over 600 members. And I'm currently a battalion commander of the Engineer Battalion, the 101st Engineer Battalion, the oldest unit in the history of the country. And we currently have, we're allotted 679 members, a variety of engineering tasks and skills. That's a very brief overview of 25 years of military service.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
Joe?
You don't miss much when you're driving through town, huh, Dep?
Try not to.
I can tell, and thank you for your service.
Thank you, sir.
I have a prepared question, but before I do, 2 quick questions. Your officers open and close the parks in Brookline?
There's one park that they lock the gate on.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. And I'm going to ask you something about traffic. At one time, you had 2 sergeants in your traffic division. Do you have 2? How is that structured now?
So I don't oversee our traffic division, but we are currently, we have a detail sergeant, a sergeant managing the detail office, and then we have 2 traffic sergeants, 2 additional traffic sergeants.
My question is this: traffic safety is a very common concern amongst our residents. Tell us your experience with traffic enforcement. How do you draw the line between educating drivers and enforcement, and how would you deploy your resources as the chief, or possibly partner with neighboring communities to enforce traffic issues? Have you done that in Brookline? If you can give me examples, that would be great.
Sure. I can't say that we've partnered with surrounding agencies for specifically traffic enforcement, but we have certainly addressed numerous, almost daily or weekly at least, traffic concerns in Brookline. And so I think it comes to hearing what the issue is, and then oftentimes sending an officer or sergeant out to firsthand observe what the problem is, and try to work with, whether it's the transportation board or the DPW. Oftentimes it's a matter of signage needing improvement, or some type of traffic control measure needing to be put in place, whether it's speed bumps or in front of the temporary firehouse, the block the box, thing like that. So I think there's ways that the police department can really be proactive in things, and then we also need to be reactive and hear what the community says. So, thinking about what Fire Chief Lund was talking about, the safety concerns in front of the firehouse. I see lighting as a major concern, that I think having some additional lighting and some larger signs would probably help improve that significantly. Providing the firefighters with some flashlights. In police world, we carry flashlights that often can switch over to a strobe light. That's very effective in trying to gain drivers' attention, especially as daylight diminishes a little bit. So I think, I'll try to be a little more brief in this answer, but that,
No, that's fine.
if that
That's
makes
fine.
sense.
Excellent, thank you.
As the chief, managing personnel will be one of your most important responsibilities. How do you ensure fairness and impartiality in hiring, promoting, mentoring, and disciplining members of the department? How will you maintain trust and morale when employees disagree with or are disappointed by a hiring or discipline decision? And finally, this is a smaller department than Brookline. How would you develop future leaders within the department and encourage professional growth and development even when promotional opportunities are somewhat limited?
Sure. So I'll start with the latter part first. I think developing officers is one of the most important and critical things as a law enforcement leader that we can do, because and I was fortunate enough to experience this early in my career. I had a mentor that really encouraged education, really encouraged training, and so that's kind of the foundation that I came into, and so I've tried to continue that throughout my career, and I'm very passionate about training. I've found that not all trainings are the same. Some are hit or miss, and some are valuable and some are not. But trying to identify and find the right trainings that provide that professional development to officers is critical, because whether there's opportunity for advancement or not, that's a benefit to the community. And I view every officer as a leader within the community. And so they're going into a situation, whether it's a 911 call or it's a community meeting or it's a community complaint, and they don't need to go in and be in charge, but they need to have the ability to be in charge at a moment's notice. And so every officer really has to be a natural leader at the core of what they do. And so some officers need and some officers want some additional development in that role. So trying to develop subordinates through training is critical. In terms of treating people fairly, I think it would be great if law enforcement was a world that was just black and white. Here's the rules, and you do this or you don't do this, and that's the way it is. But we live in the gray, but I think having well-produced, well-informed policy that officers are educated on and very familiar with, I think helps everyone understand at least the left and right limits, here's the framework, here's the groundwork, here's the important things, and here's the line you cannot cross. And I think that's critical. As I said before, as an outsider, I have no choice but to treat everyone fairly. I have no previous history, or I do know a few Westwood officers, but I would come in with an open mind and really have no preconceived biases or anything.
Thank you.
Sure.
Westwood strongly values the collaboration between the police department and our public schools, as well as with community coalitions like the Human Rights Task Force and the Westwood Community Coalition to Combat Hate Speech. Would you please discuss your view of the school resource officer role, how schools, police, and the community should balance information sharing with student privacy, and how law enforcement should respond with respect to incidents involving hate speech and our youth.
Sure. So I think that those two are polar opposites, I would say, in the sense that the way we respond. So, I think hate speech is absolutely unacceptable and needs to be taken with the utmost concern, and resources and effort need to be focused in deterring and responding to incidents, whether it's a graffiti incident or something of that nature. Because as I mentioned before, it's the concern, it's the fear of what is underlying, what is the potential with someone with such awful, or at a loss for words, but with beliefs that would cause them to take such action or use such speech. It really presents a larger concern of what else they're capable of. And so I think that requires a heavy hand. On the other side of that is our response to juvenile incidents. And so I think, protecting juveniles' privacy is paramount. I think working with the schools, and more often than not working with parents, is key to resolving juvenile delinquency or juvenile disciplinary or juvenile criminal action. Their brains are still developing. They're not. And it doesn't mean that they should be treated as a lesser person because they haven't fully developed into adulthood. I've found, as the father of a teenage daughter, that having in-depth conversations and treating them with respect that you would treat any other person in the community goes a long way. Partnering with the schools is critical. In Brookline, we do not have school resource officers currently. They were voted out of the schools in 2020, and we have not been able to get them back in since then. And it has presented a significant challenge. We have been really kind of one hand tied behind our back in terms of communication and sharing information. It helps us when we have those good relationships with the schools. Now, I will say we have a great relationship with the school and the school staff. We are just prohibited in kind of being present in the schools during the school day and kind of maintaining a persistent presence there. We can respond to calls there, but we can't stay there. And so that's been a challenge. I'm fortunate to have 3 youth resource officers currently who are still very involved and still really make a tremendous effort to know and understand the youth and the juveniles and the families within our community. We have what we call our family unit, which takes when we have an incident with a juvenile or with a family, whether it's a domestic violence incident or a juvenile delinquency issue, and we work with our in-house clinicians to conduct the follow-up. And so when we're sharing information with each other, and hopefully one day again with the schools, it really helps provide a full picture of what's going on in a juvenile's life, and try to provide them the resources that they need to get back on track.
So understanding that you don't have the SRO role now
Sure.
in Brookline, what would be your view of that role here if you were to be chief?
So I think the SRO is critical. As I mentioned before, the communities of our youth and our seniors are really the bookends of the community, and the youth are really at a vulnerable point in life, and decisions they make can have lasting consequences. I think it's critical that Westwood Police have an officer who knows the youth, who knows a little bit about their background, about their family, and their whatever circumstances has led them to have a police encounter. And often, hopefully, it's not in a negative context, and we have more encounters in a positive context. I know Westwood has the Police Explorers program. I think opportunities like that are phenomenal to develop and grow. And I think there's plenty of opportunity to get to know the youth and then be able to know them on a first name basis if and when they're needed to call in an emergency.
Joe?
Before I get to my question, Deb,
Yes.
quick follow-up. Are there not discussions about getting SROs back in Brookline now?
Yes, we are working to get SROs back in Brookline. And I think we are making some positive steps. As I mentioned, it's a fairly bureaucratic system at times. But we're trying to get there. And I'm optimistic about.
And kudos to your SROs for staying in touch. My question is let's talk about your involvement with union activity within the department. How have you approached labor management relationships and collective bargaining? And also want to talk to you about, and you can choose either organization, as far as employee assistance, coaching, support, and that sort of element.
Sure. So in one of my roles when I was the patrol division commander, I oversaw our dispatch center. And so as the sworn officer in charge of the dispatch center, I was involved in the contract negotiations for our dispatchers who fall within the, actually fall within the Teamsters Union, which is quite a challenging negotiation process. And they, so that was my first experience sitting on the other side of the table for contract negotiations. I found it to be a little bit challenging at times, but at the end of the day, I think communicating with union leadership and having an opportunity to understand what's really important to them, and then what's critical. Often, I've been very fortunate. Both our police union president and our the head of the dispatch union, our chair there, they're very common sense. At the end of the day, they understand what the police department or the dispatch center really has to have and what is required. And so it's just a matter of trying to find that middle ground. They're going to ask for a lot, and we just need to have that negotiation to get to that middle ground. But at the end of the day, we're all striving towards the same thing. We all know how critical these various components and these personnel are, and retaining them through somewhat amenable contract negotiations is key.
You spoke a little bit about some discipline issues military-wise, but what about in between, as far as coaching and assistance for officers and
Sure.
that sort of thing?
So I think career mentoring is important. What I would like to talk about is the opportunity to respond to officers after a critical incident, and try to manage stress levels after that. I think is critical to retaining a positive and well-performing officer in their profession. So officers are faced with some of the worst scenes and horrific calls most people hopefully never experience. And so we've used the Critical Incident Stress Management Team, which is a regional team that comes in after a critical incident to meet with officers, and that's a peer-on-peer meeting in a group setting where officers are offered the opportunity to debrief and discuss the critical incident with members from another agency that are not involved, don't have any ties to the department that responded to the incident. So in Brookline, we might have officers from a neighboring agency or a couple towns away, and they'd come in and meet with the officers. The opportunity there is to try to identify those that might not be handling it or might not be dealing with it as well, and provide them the resources that they need for follow-up. And I think that if we don't do that, I think we run the risk of losing they can interpret that one singular incident or multiple incidents compounded over the course of time, and really start to take a negative light on their profession. And as that progresses over the course of time, it can really lead to a disgruntled and poor work environment and a poor performance. So I think addressing things like that at the very moment offers an opportunity to really keep people on track and coach them through their career.
That cumulative effect can be profound.
Sure.
One last question. How many clinicians do you have available with the Brookline Police?
So we currently have 4 clinicians. One is our domestic violence advocate. One is oversees and kind of manages the clinical program that we have. One is in charge of our TTAC, which is our Technical Training and Assistance Center for Norfolk County. And just as of 2 months ago, we hired our co-response clinician, who she rides in a cruiser with an officer, and responds to calls. Whether
Excellent.
it's a traffic crash or whatever, they go to the call.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So I had a prepared question here about timely communication and social media, which I feel like you've sort of already addressed. So I thought I'd ask you a question about how do the police departments and the fire departments collaborate in Brookline, and how do you see, how would you sort of advocate the 2 departments in Westwood working together, whether it's mutual training or coordinating your response and policies?
Sure. So, I mean, we do a lot together. We might have a friendly rivalry at times, but I think it's important that we have a good relationship. So some of the things that we've done in the past, I responded, this was a little while ago, but we responded to a mutual aid request from Chelsea for an active shooter situation. It was a domestic violence situation in which a suspect had fired at a neighbor and then retreated into his house. They were requesting mutual aid. At the time, I was the commander of our tactical team, and we responded. Upon our arrival, we had assisted on the perimeter, and shortly later, the suspect had lit the house on fire that he was in. And so we watched firsthand the fire department try to contain that fire. The buildings there are very close together, and so they had evacuated some of the surrounding residents, but there was a significant concern that the fire would spread, but there was still a threat inside with an armed individual. So we watched them attempt to lead the fire department up using shields, and it didn't look very smooth, I'll leave it at that. And so immediately following that, I worked with our fire department, and we began training once a quarter that year, and then once a year now with the fire department to try to train on tactical scenarios in which we can assist the fire department in what they need to do, and we can provide them some level of safety. The fire department's been great in Brookline. We also had the fire department come in and do a block of in-service for officers on fire safety. Oftentimes, because we're on the street, we're the first to arrive. And if it's a building fire, we might think we know everything as police officers, but we don't. And so getting some insight from the fire department about what to do in trying to evacuate residents out of a residence or a building in a building fire or a house fire. They would tell us not to go in, but they also know that there's scenarios and circumstances in which officers might go in, and they just want us to be as safe as possible. And so we were able to gain some insight into how to kind of open, smash windows out and as we move through a residence or building to try to ventilate and keep officers safe. Sure.
As a follow-up to that,
Sure.
as the new chief in Westwood, what approach would you take to making sure that we are prepared for any incident that might occur in our schools?
Sure. So I think working with making sure that officers are ready for responding to any situation. And, you know, there's active threat response is a national model in which police and fire train together to respond to incidents such as an active shooter scenario. I think having relationships with teams or regional assets such as MetroLec are critical. But at the end of the day, emergency in the school is going to be responded to and likely dealt with prior to any type of tactical team response. It would really be handled with the officers that are present and on scene working that shift. And likewise, the fire department, whoever's working. So making sure that they're trained together and integrated and able to respond to a critical incident, that the fire department, I'm sure, knows kind of the warm zone and the hot zone concept, and that the officers know as well, and they're able to protect the fire department as best as possible while addressing a threat and providing medical aid. Sure.
Let's talk about budgeting. Westwood's budget is approximately $6 million. Tell me about your experience budgeting, your secrets to it, and communicating the department's needs to elected officials and residents, and how do you view the chief's role working with our town administrator, our finance commission, and the select board?
Sure. So early in my career, I was tasked with essentially being the grant manager for our UASI grant, which is the Urban Area Security Initiative grant that is provided to the Metro Boston area. And so that's really where I started kind of managing a budget. We would we'd write abstracts and apply for grant funding for various capability gaps that we had for equipment or for training and things like that. And then we would receive the funding and we'd have to manage what we had and work within those confines. And so as I've moved up to deputy superintendent, I've been very fortunate to work for Chief Pastor, Jen Pastor, who has provided us deputies as an opportunity to kind of see the budget, understand the budget, work with our business office to work within the confines of our budget. And looking at Westwood's budget, police budget, you know, just like most police departments, the vast majority of that budget is allocated towards salary and resources. And so I think it's about $375,000 for everything else. And so a pretty large budget. When it comes time to make cuts, you know, personnel are our most critical piece. As I mentioned, that baseline 911 uniformed response is really the foundation of what we do. And so cuts can have drastic impacts because we're working with a limited training budget, fleet budget, you know, police supply budget, things like that. But I'm no stranger to budget cuts. I've experienced it multiple times throughout my career, and you know, trying to communicate that within the police department, and so that officers don't feel like the rug just got pulled out from under them. So they may have been scheduled to attend a training, and now that training can't occur. But I think investing in our personnel and training is really the most important piece of it. Within the Commonwealth, the efforts made following the post commission and some of the accreditation requirements, MPTC, the Mass Police Training Council, has really increased the number of trainings that they offer for officers and expanded the amount to just get away from just the basic firearms qualification, CPR, first aid, and really expand into areas such as social media training and things of that nature. So I think there's opportunity to work within a limited budget or a constrained budget by taking advantage of some of the free trainings that are out there. I think I kind of rambled there, but I don't know if that answered.
It's good, thank you.
Sure.
I'm good.
Okay.
Before we go into closing remarks, any other follow-up questions?
No?
No? Okay.
You covered them all?
So this is now your fourth and final interview here in Westwood. We want to give you the opportunity to let the community and the board know anything else you'd like to share about yourself and why you are seeking this position.
Sure. So I have, throughout my career, been fortunate enough to have great mentors, work for great supervisors and great law enforcement leaders. I think that has developed me to a point that I am ready to lead a law enforcement agency, specifically Westwood. I love this police department, and as I've gone through this, what I would describe as rigorous and exhaustive process, I've just found that I'm just that much more intrigued and that much more interested in this community and in this town, and having the opportunity to lead this police department. I think I have the experience and the qualities to make hard decisions. In my career, and as was mentioned in my background, I have been subject of litigation, and in that case, someone was, we conducted a promotional board interview process. A person was not selected. They were not happy with that decision. I wrote my recommendation that they not be considered for promotion, and that was based on historical documentation and incidents with that individual. And I knew that would likely lead to a complaint and potentially a lawsuit. But I'm not going to compromise what I know is right based on fear of legal action or complaints. I think at the end of the day, we have an ethical and integrity responsibility to provide a community with the best in law enforcement and the best in law enforcement leadership. And so that is something that I've taken personally and at my own personal peril in terms of stress and things of that nature. But it's the right decision. And so, I'm someone who's willing to come into Westwood, and, I hope it doesn't happen. But the reality of executive leadership is that these types of things do happen. And I'm ready to handle any and all challenges. I look forward to potentially having the opportunity to work with all of you and to work with the community, most importantly, and the officers of Westwood to really provide what the town wants and deserves. So I appreciate your time.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.
Thank you.
Nice to meet you as well. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. What we say.
Good morning.
Michael.
Very nice to see you. Good to see you. Good morning, Lieutenant DiLalla. As you know, I am Mary Ann LeBlanc Cummings, Chair of the Westwood Select Board. With me are my colleagues, Joe Prevotera and Aaron Sibley. We are delighted that you are here with us today, and we appreciate your interest in the position as Chief of Police. The board has reserved 1 hour for this interview. We have 10 prepared questions, and so we'll ask that you please try to limit your answers to about 3 minutes so that we have time for follow-ups and discussion, and you will be given the opportunity for a brief closing statement at the conclusion of those questions.
Sure.
I will start out by asking you what has drawn you to apply for the position as the next Chief of Police, and as part of that, what aspects of policing in Westwood strike you as unique, and what new ideas and changes would you bring as chief, and what would you preserve, and why?
Okay, great. What's drawn me to be the chief here in Westwood is my strong ties to the community. I grew up here in Westwood, grew up on Youngs Road. I came up through the Westwood Public Schools, and I also married my wife, who's also from Westwood. And I continue to work here for the past 15 years with the Westwood PD professionally. Clearly, I have those ties. I have a deep commitment to service to this community, and the natural progression, having worked at Westwood PD, serving in the capacity as a patrol officer, eventually as a patrol sergeant, and then the administrative sergeant, and then patrol lieutenant, and now the administrative lieutenant and acting chief. I feel like it has prepared me to take the next step as the executive officer of this department, and that I have the skills, abilities, and the knowledge to do that job effectively and successfully. The second part, I would say, I'm sorry, what was the second part question?
What would you preserve that is in the department now, and what would you change?
I would preserve the way we go about interacting with the community. I think we do an excellent job engaging the community through our special events. We have events such as Westwood Day. We have events such as the Little League Parade, fireworks, the PMC Challenge bike ride. I think our officers do an excellent job at getting out there and engaging in the community. Some things that I would change, I think we do a good job with the schools. We have an excellent SRO program. There have been times where we have asked to fund a second SRO position. That's something I'm looking to change and potentially get a second SRO. I'm also looking to bring officers in as liaisons to schools. It was a program that worked quite well in a neighboring community, and it's something that I've always liked and I think is very successful with the kids. A big part of community policing in Westwood is actually investing in interacting with our youth. This is where our youth learn about policing, public safety, what it means to be involved in the community. So interacting with our youth is a priority for me, and that's something I would like to build upon. And the last question, the last part.
The last part is just what would you change?
Yeah.
And what would you preserve?
Yeah, okay, great.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Lieutenant, let's talk about ethical community policing, what it means to you, and how would you ensure policing practices reflect the community's values?
So, in ethical leadership, we typically look at a bunch of different lenses. One is the people, the community. Basically, the environment is another aspect of that. So ethical leadership is important as the chief of police in Westwood because we need to maintain those things so that we have a safe place, a happy place that our community, our stakeholders, and our residents can thrive in. They want to know that when they call the police, they have the services that they need, but at the same time that we're protecting all of the things that matter to us, such as privacy and, again, our environment. So ethical leadership is more than just answering calls and maybe going out and enforcing laws, but there's so many other aspects that contribute to the well-being of our residents in the community. So ethical leadership is extremely important, and that's something that I would bring as the full-time chief here to Westwood.
Thank you.
So community feedback has consistently emphasized visibility, accessibility, and engagements as priorities and areas of growth for the department. How specifically would you strengthen relationships between the police department and the community? And specifically as chief, how would you make yourself visible and accessible to the people who live here?
Visibility is, in and of itself, an old-fashioned term in the sense you just need to get out there and actually walk the streets of Westwood. Putting on the patrol cap, walking where people can see you, and again, having grew up here and having the relationships that I have currently with members of the community and stakeholders, that's not too challenging for me. I know these faces, I know these people, I know these families. It's something that it just requires you to get out. Maybe you go downtown to Westwood Center, walk the good block, make it part of your routine so that they can see you, you can engage in conversations. It's a great way to catch up with people, see how they're doing. Sometimes you get feedback just on a normal walk and talk. People will be like, hey, you know what, Chief? Something happened the other day down in this neighborhood, maybe you don't know about that. And it starts a conversation, and it's open lines of communication. That's what it's all about. This is a collaborative partnership with our community. It's not just we have our own agenda, we're gonna go out and do what we wanna do, but it's opening up those lines and working with our residents so that we have a safer place and a happy place to live and work. It also requires getting buy-in from your officers and members of your department. I think when you lead by example and you're out there and you're visible, officers are more apt to buy into what you're doing and follow along. And if we can get officers, and I think our officers in Westwood do an excellent job at being visible, but if we can get them to improve on getting out of the patrol car, maybe there's a sporting event, there's a baseball game down at Morrison or at the high school, get out, engage with the residents, engage with the parents. It's a great way, it goes a long way. And, the feedback's always positive. Usually it trickles back somehow where you find out, hey, you heard from Mrs. Jones, like Officer Smith was down at the baseball game, and it was great to see them down there, and we were really happy to have them there. So visibility from the chief down is critical. I think we do a pretty good job, but there's always room for improvement. And as chief, I'm going to be out there. This is the community I grew up in. This is the community that afforded me all the success that I've achieved in my career and in my personal life. And it's something that comes naturally to me. So visibility is not going to be an issue if I'm selected as the chief.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Lieutenant, as you know, as part of this recruitment process, the town conducted a survey of the community and also an internal survey of the police department in terms of what folks are looking for in a new chief and regarding the department generally. And while a majority of the respondents indicated that morale within the department is positive, a notable minority expressed concerns regarding morale, communication, and organizational culture. What do you take away from that feedback, and how would you work to promote trust, accountability, and positive culture among the ranks of the department?
Sure. Morale in policing is extremely important. It's what drives culture. And in public policy, generally speaking, we try to serve the greater good. But I look at it, we're a small enough department, we're 50 members total. I want to satisfy and try to reach out to everybody. If the majority are happy, they're doing well, they view the department in a positive light, we're doing good. But if we can get everybody to at least be close to that line, I think we'll be doing even better. It starts with building trust. As a leader, that is the number one fundamental of being able to reach across the aisle, extend your hand, and work with people that might have differing opinions. In law enforcement and maybe in other professional organizations, not everybody's going to have the same opinion, but people want to have a platform to be heard. And I think that goes a long way. You got to be able to actively listen, to have empathy for people you work with, and to hear what they're trying to tell you. As a leader, that's something that I've always brought to the table. So while morale, I think, is very good at the Westwood PD, it could be better. Again, for a few minority officers that might have differing opinions about different processes or way things were run, I'm open to reaching out to them, hearing what they have to say. And again, maybe you can't always accommodate them, but giving them feedback on maybe what you're thinking or why you think something's good or something's not good will go a long way. And again, I have those relationships. I've worked in the department for 15 years. I lived in this town for over 19 years. I'm a Westwood guy. My coworkers know what I'm about. I built those relationships. Relationships aren't built overnight. They take time. In some instances, it's taken me 15 years to build trust with certain officers that I work with. And that's a lot of work. It's a lot of days put into it. And I think that's a very important part in keeping morale where it's at. I have those relationships, And again, even with some officers that might have differing opinions, I feel like I still have good relationships with those officers as well. So again, building trust is key. Actively listening to all of our members of our department with what they have to say and hearing what their concerns are. And in law enforcement too, there's a lot of things that affect morale and culture. Organizational stressors, occupational stressors. Now, occupational stressors are naturally inherent of the job, putting on the uniform, the duty belt, the vest, going to calls, your blood pressure goes up. We try to promote officer wellness. But it's the organizational stressors that I think are the most important ones, whether, it's excessive paperwork, lack of staffing, or, whether it's just, people aren't happy about promotional processes. It's trying to mitigate those problems that will actually help raise morale as well. So there's a lot of factors that go into play, but I think keeping an open mind, open lines of communication, and continuing to build upon those relationships is critical for boosting morale. You're welcome.
Can I just ask a quick follow-up question? I'm just curious, and it's not been a long period of time, but in your tenure as the acting interim, is there anything that you learned about the position of being the chief that surprised you, or any, do you have any reflections on sort of this window of time where you've been the acting chief that you could
Sure.
share with us? And again, I know it hasn't been long.
No, but I actually have a good example. There was a promotion for a specialty position. There were two candidates, and I selected one candidate based on the process. And the other candidate, I called into my office the next day, and we had a conversation. And to my surprise, this was an officer that we've had a pretty good working relationship, but maybe haven't seen eye to eye on some things and have had differing opinions over the years. But I sat him down, and we had a great conversation, and I provided feedback, and I was very direct. And I was actually surprised that going that extra step to provide feedback, actually tell the officer, hey, maybe this was an area you could improve on, and there's other opportunities if you continue to do X, Y, and Z. And the response was magnificent. This was an officer that responded very well to that meeting, and then in the subsequent days, took some action, some community engagement action, and it was very rewarding to see. So just even in my short tenure as acting chief, I think that's where continuing to build trust and relationships with your people, following up with them, providing feedback goes a long way, and the result was remarkable.
Lieutenant, let's talk about traffic. Traffic safety is consistently one of the most common concerns raised by residents. Tell us about your experience with traffic enforcement. How do you draw the line between educating drivers and enforcement? And have you ever partnered with neighboring communities to work on traffic enforcement or traffic control issues?
Good question. Traffic has been and remains our number one issue in town. It's our number one complaint from our residents. And it's an area as a department from our patrol division that we do very, very well. We are actively looking for traffic offenders. All three shifts are engaged in traffic enforcement throughout the day, 24/7. We are very proactive. We make a decent amount of motor vehicle traffic stops, and our philosophy on traffic is, for the most part, to educate drivers on the violations that they're committing. Discretion is key, and our officers are highly trained and are highly educated in their jobs, especially in traffic enforcement. And I can assure the community that we have the very best personnel at the Westwood PD handling traffic. And I'll honestly say, if I had to put a percentage to it, maybe 90% of our traffic stops are either verbal warnings or written warnings. We're not looking to be punitive with violators. If people are from the community or they're cooperating with the officer, it's a great moment. And actually talk about community engagement from a simple traffic stop. Officers are able to have a face-to-face interaction with someone from the community, or even if they're not from the community, and say, hey, listen, stopped you because you were speeding. And a lot of the time, people are very receptive to law enforcement. They're respectful. They understand what they've done. And it's just a great way to have that face-to-face interaction and communicate with them. And the result is generally positive. Now, sometimes offenses go too far, without getting into specific offenses, but, unfortunately, if someone commits, an OUI crash or something like that, enforcement's going to be taken. But typically speaking, the discretion is left to the officers. They have the deciding factor on whether or not they're gonna issue a verbal warning or a written warning, or maybe a monetary citation. Again, that's completely left to the officer's discretion. But again, rest assured to the community, our officers are looking to educate the public first, and that's our priority. And in doing so, we teach our public and we keep our community safe. Now, partnering with neighboring communities, we traditionally have not done that. Usually, when we're traffic enforcement, when we're working with our neighboring partners, it's usually a live event that's going on in the moment. So maybe there's a failure to stop that's started in Walpole and that's coming down Route 1, or it's coming up Route 109 from Medfield. That's typically when we will work collaboratively with our mutual aid partners, and we'll try to assist in bringing that incident to a stop. But we don't do any other collaborative enforcement type initiatives with any neighboring communities. That's not traditionally common in our suburban law enforcement area. So,
Thank you.
you're welcome.
As a chief, as you know, managing personnel is one of the most important responsibilities. And how do you ensure impartiality and fairness in hiring, promoting, mentoring, and discipline? And how specifically will you maintain trust and morale when employees disagree with or are disappointed by a decision? You spoke a little bit about that earlier,
sure.
particularly regarding promotions and discipline. And how do you develop future leaders within the department and encourage professional growth when in a smaller department, promotional opportunities are somewhat limited?
Sure. Ensuring fairness in the promotional policy, I'll start by saying we have a promotional policy in the patrol officer's contract. So they're bound by that contract, and we follow it. There are specific guidelines. We go through that. Officers typically have to take a written exam, then they go through an assessment center, then they go through a chief's panel interview, and then the final selection is made. Promotional processes, especially in Westwood, are extremely competitive. Why? Because we've got top-notch personnel. So when you have highly qualified candidates, it's always going to be a challenging decision for whoever's in charge to make that pick. With that being said, again, not everybody's going to be happy. Naturally, as people, when you don't get promoted, it's kind of a sad day when you didn't get that promotion. But again, I think when you have that relationship with your coworkers and your peers, and you're able to build off the trust that you have with them and communicate with them and provide them feedback on maybe areas they can improve, that's where you mitigate maybe any potential issues with unhappy employees due to a promotional process. I'll say this, professional development as the training coordinator, as someone who field trained over a dozen officers in this department when I was a field training officer, and now currently the training coordinator. Professional development is something that is also critical to job growth and opportunity and officer wellness. Developing our future leaders is important. The reality is, at some point, as executive leaders, we age out or we find other opportunities, we retire, and we need to make sure that we have a succession plan. So identifying talent is always at the forefront of leadership. Again, I think at Westwood PD, we're fortunate because we have highly qualified candidates that are consistently putting in for specialty assignments and for promotional processes. It's a good problem to have. So we're blessed in that regard, and identifying talent starts with hiring the right people. It's the first step in making sure that the department is headed in the right direction, and spending time on the hiring process is extremely important. you have to bring the right people into this community, and you have to bring the right people into this department. And I will say our hiring process has been top-notch. We've actually had officers come in through as transfers. We do extensive backgrounds on these officers. It's a very difficult process to get through, and we've had very, very good success in hiring top-notch candidates. And that's where it starts, is identifying them from the get-go. Once they're in the department, it's based on their work ethic, their body of work, and their attitude towards the department. And that's how you identify talent. And then from there, providing them the opportunities to further develop themselves through training that's available to them.
Thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry, to answer, you also asked about discipline. I'll say this, discipline, it's one of those areas that law enforcement agencies typically don't like to address or talk about. But the reality is that accountability is one of the core principles that builds transparency in the community. The public demands it. When, again, police officers are people just like everybody else. They make mistakes, but they can learn from those mistakes. It's not always, or let me rephrase, it shouldn't always be looked at in a negative light, like, oh, you got disciplined, or maybe you got spoken to by a supervisor because you did something wrong. Believe it or not, when citizens come in to the station to speak with a supervisor about and have a complaint about an officer, that is an opportunity to have a face-to-face interaction with the member of the community and learn from them. Maybe there's something we're not doing right, or maybe there's something we can do better. It's an opportunity to take that and spin it into a positive. And quite honestly, a lot of the times when we speak to our officers, like, hey, we had someone said that you did this, or maybe you were a little curt with someone when speaking to them. The officer's like, you know what, maybe you're right. I thank you for letting me know. That's an area I can work on. And it makes them better in serving our community. So I just wanted to address that. Okay, you're welcome.
And just one other follow-up, Lieutenant. We're aware that most, if not all, police departments have, for lack of a better term, cliques. As in many workplaces. How can we be sure that if you were to be the chief, that you would treat everybody fairly, regardless of your personal and professional relationships with them in the department?
Listen, for me, I think it's a pretty easy thing. I like everybody that I work with, even if we have differing opinions. The fact of the matter is, I love being a police officer, and that's the common bond that we all have. Not being such a large agency, everybody knows everybody in our agency. We know each other's wives, husbands, children, dogs' names. I mean, we're a close-knit family. Treating people fairly is the essence of building trust in relationships, and I think when you treat people fairly, you get better production out of those people. And I think we do a pretty good job at that at the Westwood PD. Again, I think due to promotional processes or specialty assignments, when people naturally don't get something that they're striving for, they're going to be upset. But that didn't mean that they weren't treated fairly. And everyone at the Westwood PD has the opportunity to go to training. I can't remember the last time an officer was actually denied going to a training that they wanted to go to. We provide equal opportunity to everybody if there's areas that they're looking to maybe get more educated on, or opportunity to work overtime. We have a fair and equitable overtime system for details and extra duty. So in that regard, we have a fair system. So we have systems in place. I think in addition, the good relationships that we have, I would generally say that the officers and the members of the department will tell you that they're treated fairly.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Lieutenant.
Actually, I think it's my.
Yep.
Sorry. I've got another question for you, Lieutenant. Excuse me. So as you know, Westwood values collaboration between the police department and our public schools, along with our community partners, including the Human Rights Task Force and the Community Coalition to Combat Hate Speech. Would you please discuss your view of the school resource officer position, how schools, police, and the community should balance information sharing with student privacy, and how law enforcement should respond with respect to incidents involving hate speech and our youth?
Sure. So the schools, like I said earlier, are very important. We need to invest in our youth. We need to engage them. We need to be visible so that they can see us and learn what the police do in their community and that we're there to help. I've always viewed the school resource officer program not just as a program, but as a philosophy, because that's what it is. We're invested in these children. We do a very good job at being in the schools. We have an excellent SRO program, and the officers that have served in that role have been excellent officers that are very well-trained and good at their jobs. Our current SRO does a wonderful job getting in and out of the schools and assisting with the needs of those schools and administrations. There's room to improve. Like I said, we've been trying to get a second SRO for a long time. Most of our neighboring communities, in a recent study that was done, have 2 funded SROs. As chief, I would be looking to create liaisons similar to what Chief Brooks did in Norwood, where we have officers assigned to schools so that we get a little bit more visibility and presence with those officers and those schools and helping assist them in whatever it is that they need. With the Human Rights Task Force Committee, we have an officer from our agency assigned to that committee. With the schools in hate speech and hate incidents, we also have officers that attend those meetings. We recently had an incident that came out of the middle school, and we had an active involvement in that. You know, again, while it might not have risen to the level of a crime having been committed, it's not always about criminal elements. We do a lot of, and actually 90% of the body of work that we do is not even criminally related. So we're always there, happy to work with the school administration, the school superintendent. I have a good working relationship with Tim POR right now, and we work very well collaboratively. So that's something as chief I would continue to build upon. It's definitely always been at the forefront of my leadership, and that's something we do well. So looking to maintain and continue the sustained success that we've had. Would like to see maybe some more officers integrated into the schools, but I think right now we're doing a pretty good job.
Thank you.
All set?
Yes,
Okay.
thank you, Chair.
Yep. Let's talk about your experience working with unions, labor management relationships, collective bargaining. I also want you to talk a little bit about your experience with utilizing employee wellness and support programs.
Sure.
Give me some examples.
Okay, so first part, working with unions. When I was a patrol officer, I was an active member of the Westwood local. Was never in any executive leadership roles within that union, but always had an active voice. I always felt, again, in a smaller agency, even with union-related issues, really not much different than administrative issues, in the sense that these are people that you work with every day. You might have differing opinions, but just always keeping an open line of communication, keeping an open ear to differing opinions is critical when working with unions. As a lieutenant, in working with the unions, I think it's all about relationships as well. While not a member of the Westwood local, of the patrol officers local, because as a lieutenant, we're in the superior officers union, I think it comes down to people being people and maintaining those relationships. So the union presidents for the local, I've had great working relationships with. Even in my role as acting chief, they come to me regularly with, minor issues here and there, and I'm always willing to work with them. The way I look at it, it's a two-way street. Sometimes there are things that we can accommodate, and sometimes there are things that are just driven by policy that we can't bend from. But again, always falls back to the relationships that you have with those people. You know, the union is just the term for the body, but it's really about the people. So maintaining those relationships, and I've had excellent relationships with all the e-boards that we've had since I've been in a command staff role. Officer wellness is key. We recently had an officer wellness day added in the past contract where officers can take basically a mental health day. That's excellent. Mental health issues in law enforcement is one of the forefront issues across policing in the country. I'll say this, our officers in Westwood, typically for officer wellness, they have access to a gym in the department, in the station, so they can work out physically. If they need additional resources, we're always there to assist them. Just to be, open about it, we haven't really had any officers that needed additional support services in the area of, mental health. But those resources exist. There's programs through MassCop, which is the parent union. There's programs through Brookline CIT TTAC program. And then there's programs through McLean Hospital should an officer ever get to a point where they need to get that additional assistance if they're really struggling. In recent years, we haven't had officers that needed that type of support, but that network does exist and is there for our officers. There's also the EAP through the state. We haven't had to utilize that, but that's also another resource that's available for officers. But I think officer wellness, just on a normal level, again, I think I touched upon it earlier, it's about tackling the organizational stressors that are affecting officers. I'll give you an example. In Westwood, we go leaps and bounds to try to prevent officers from being forced on a shift. That typically is an issue that officers don't receive well. No officer wants to be told they're being forced because we couldn't cover the shift on overtime because there's nobody available to work it. We have very low forces, whereas some other communities just, and the administrations just say it is what it is. Officers are forced repeatedly, week after week. That is detrimental to officer wellness. We mitigate that problem as best as we can, and we typically have very few forces throughout the year. That improves quality of life for the officers. So that's something that you have to take into consideration. Again, we maintain certain staffing levels to ensure that our officers are not overworked. They're not running from call to call, and they're not burdened by paperwork. So we think about those things, we spread it out, and we make sure that we have proper staffing, and all of those things cumulatively affect officer wellness, and I think we do a very good job at mitigating that.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I have a question about public communication and social media.
Sure.
How important to you is timely communication with the public during both sort of day-to-day police operations and also critical incidents? And in your view, what role should social media and other communication tools play in a modern police department to help build trust, share information, and engage with Westwood residents?
Very good. Social media is imperative in law enforcement and public safety messaging today. You have to utilize it. It's an area where we were somewhat held back years ago with previous town administrations with wanting to limit what was being used on social media for perception purposes for the town and whatnot. So there were different factors. But in 2026 today, social media on so many different platforms, whether it be Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, there's Truth Social, there's just so many platforms that everybody is connected in social media. And it is the fastest way to connect with the community. So yes, social media is important in public safety messaging for immediate response. We utilize X, and we do a pretty good job at publishing on it. We utilize press releases for incidents. Press releases sometimes take a little bit of time, but we work collaboratively with Laura Hayes in Town Hall, who does a wonderful job with the town social media websites and as a secondary means of getting our messages out. As chief, I would like to expand on that. I would like to designate an officer or an employee from the department to maintain our social media sites, so that we can get out our messaging quicker. So acknowledging that we have it and we're doing it, but we could do it better. And that's something that I would bring if selected as the chief. That's one of my top priorities, is actually making sure that our social media sites, that we have different sites that we're on, and that we're getting our messaging out quick, and we have someone coordinating and administrating those programs.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I could just follow up on that.
Sure.
As chief, what would you do to ensure that we are prepared for any serious incident that may occur in our schools?
In our schools. So a lot of our training is driven by accreditation and by policy. Believe it or not, when I took over as the accreditation manager, we had a very dated policy manual from the early 1990s. I revamped the entire policy, and one of the sections of our policy manual is incident command. So in not just executive leadership, but in the rank and file as well, incident command is a part of our training. We do extensive training on incident command by policy, whether we meet in a staff meeting or we're regulated by accreditation and the MPTC, which is the Police Training Council, to perform every other year live active shooter training in our schools. All of our officers have had active shooter training. They're well versed on how to respond to an incident that might involve something deadly or critical in our schools. And so my message to the community is that we are trained in this. It's bound by our training and our policy and state law. And we're prepared to handle any incident that might happen in a school.
Thank you.
Just as a sort of a tangent on that, how would you assess the cooperation currently between the police department and the fire department in town? And what recommendations would you make to either leave it all the same or change it, sort of if you were the chief?
That's a good question. I'll have to look at this in two phases. When I was a patrol officer and a sergeant, I always perceived our relation with the fire department as very strong. We respond to every medical. We're usually working hand in hand with our fire personnel, and a lot of those relationships were very strong. I got along with most of the men and women from the fire department, and I think that goes the same for my coworkers as well. As I've risen up the ranks and now at an executive level, my interaction with firefighters on medical calls or calls is a lot less. So I really can't speak to on the ground level what that might be, but from what I hear from my people is that there's no issues with the fire department. They work well with them. Now, on my end, working with Chief Lund, Assistant Chief Colin McCarthy, I have excellent working relationships with both of them, both of whom are also Westwood. Actually, Chief Lund grew up in Westwood guy. Colin's been in the fire department for a long time. So I've got good working relationships with them. And I think we, generally speaking, have a good overall working relationship with the fire department.
Do you do any joint trainings or anything like that, or anything formal sort of between the two, or is it
There's
just
always been
interpersonal?
talks,
I know
but-
they're small.
But typically
departments.
speaking, no, we haven't. But they're specifically to a specific type of active shooter training, Asher training. There have been talks over the past years trying to do something with the fire department. So that possibly could be an area where we could collaborate and work with them in some joint training.
Thanks.
I'm ready.
You ready?
I'm
Okay.
ready. Lieutenant, let's talk about one of your favorite subjects, budget preparation.
Sure.
The police budget is approximately 6.1 million. Tell us your experiences building budgets, prioritizing expenditures, communicating needs to us, the Select Board elected officials and residents, and how do you view the chief's role in working with the town administrator, the Select Board, and the FinCom to develop that budget?
I've got a good amount of experience working on the budget. The past 3 years as a lieutenant, I was fortunate enough to work hand in hand with the chief at the time on managing the budget. It was something as part of the succession planning that lieutenants get some experience getting a feel for what the budget looks like, where we're at, what are some of our expense accounts look like, what the capital budget looks like. So I have extensive experience with our budget here at the Westwood PD. When it comes to budgeting, it's always about pre-planning. You cannot pre-plan enough. It's pre-planning, pre-planning, pre-planning. And every December, we meet with Laura Bukhari to go over the budget and to forecast where we might need additional funding, or where maybe we can move some funding around to maybe allocate to different expense accounts that might need that funding a little bit more. Typically speaking, in a law enforcement agency, especially the Westwood PD, we're just under $6 million overall for our budget. 90% of our budget is salaries and overtime. Believe it or not, most of our expense accounts, we typically encumber less than what we're allocated, so we do very well in those areas, and then a lot of the extra cash can actually go to the overall budget, so that we come in under every year on July 1. Every July 1, we do come in under budget. Proud to say that we watch it closely. We're fortunate that we have a financial analyst in our office, in Mike O'Toole. Mike O'Toole is wonderful at managing the budget, keeping me informed on what's going on, where money is going, where we need to tighten up. And then typically speaking, a lot of our funding, deficiencies are usually in the area of overtime. But, in law enforcement, as a first responder, there's usually unforeseen circumstances that arise in any fiscal year. You might have officers, which we currently are going through, that are out injured. We've got, officers that are on military leave overseas for the next year. So it's these unforeseen circumstances that present the challenges that you might have in your budget. But typically speaking, over time, to cover shifts, to maintain proper staffing, and to provide and maintain the proper services to our community is our goal. And typically, that's the area we focus on the most. And we do a very good job at managing our budget. And I'd like to say, personally, I've always been someone who I've viewed as fiscally responsible and financially conservative. So managing our budget is something we've done well over the past 10 years, and I don't see any issues continuing forward with how we manage our budget. We do a very good job, and I don't see any issues moving forward if I'm the chief.
Follow-up question.
Sure.
How many, when it comes to budgeting, how many marked patrol cars and how many unmarked patrol cars does the department have?
So we have, let me just count real quick. We have 13 marked units, and then we have 8 unmarked.
Thank you. I'm good.
Okay, thanks, Joe. Any other follow-up questions board members would like to ask before we move into the closing statement? Take your time, Joe. And Aaron?
What would you like to see done better?
I'd like to see more involvement in the schools and more involvement from our officers in the community. Like I spoke earlier, I think we do a good job. I think we could do better. Again, I think some of the challenges is, as a new chief, is differentiating yourself from maybe a previous chief and how they did things in their leadership styles. And so implementing your own new styles, I think for any candidate will present as challenging, but also an opportunity to bring the department in different avenues to have further success in the community. I'd like to see more involvement. So I did community engagement, the schools, social media was the other area. I think we do a good job. I think we can do better. So that's an area I'd like to build upon.
Thank you.
Welcome.
So this is now your fourth and final interview in this process. So we want to give you a moment to let community members and this board know anything else you'd like to share about why you're seeking this position and your qualifications for it.
Sure. I'd just like to say to the community, the members of the select board and town government, that I'm the right candidate for this job because I'm committed to service as a Westwood police officer. I've spent my entire career in this agency. I know this agency inside and out. There's not a single process that I'm not familiar with or knowledgeable about. I have the relationships with my peers and the members of my department. Again, like I had said earlier, years of building trust and building those relationships. I like the people that I work with. I want to continue to build on that. And I'm fortunate enough that I work with people that are highly qualified and highly trained, and I want to take that to the next level. I grew up in town. I know a lot of stakeholders. I know a lot of residents. I know a lot of business owners in town. I owe so much to this community. It was a place that allowed me to grow up, to succeed academically, professionally, athletically when I played sports, and even socially. I met my wife, who's from Westwood, been married for 17 years. I have 2 wonderful sons. I coach them in various sports. So I'm also a family guy. I think I bring a lot of different outside experiences to this job as well. My wife and I own a horse farm, a horse riding farm in Plainville. I've run my own business before as a master plumber. So I've worked in other industries, and I can do this job. I've been doing the job since I've been made acting chief, and I was doing the job even before in my 3 years as a lieutenant. Again, I feel like being from Westwood, I am deeply invested in this community, and I have the roots to succeed in this job. And that's pretty much what you have in Mike DiLalla, a guy that grew up here, is committed to the community and to the department. And, you know, even in my time, I'd say my biggest accomplishment in this department was getting the department accredited. We'd never been accredited before. For those of you who don't know what accreditation is, it's basically a set of standards, industry standards and best practices. And we have achieved that. And when I was going through the accreditation process, what I learned was that Westwood PD has always done well. We were actually hitting 85% of those standards without even knowing it. And we took it to the next level and got us fully accredited. And that, I just want to tell the community, like, being accredited is a form of transparency and a form of accountability. We are adhering to the highest standards, and I learned what all those standards were and got us to that point. And again, I just have the institutional knowledge of what we've built in Westwood and those relationships with my peers that make me the best candidate for this job. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mary Ann.
Okay. Thanks, Michael.
Thank you, Ann. Nice to see you. Good to see you. Thank you. Okay.
You're going to need a motion to adjourn this meeting.
So adjourned?
So moved,
Second.
seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned. Thank you very much.